Hi everyone, welcome back to database. Hi everyone, hi everyone, welcome back to that. Yeah. Hi everyone, welcome back to database. Got MJ and I here talking about another very exciting topic in Fabric, which is the shortcuts. Before that, just a rebranding message that we changing the channel name to Fabric Developer. And so you'll probably see some logo change. It's still the same format and everything. So no big changes from that regards. But I think it will just be good for us to, since we mainly be focusing about Fabric from here on,
Yeah,
so it will be more appropriate if you actually change it to a Fabric. So that's great, and there's been a lot of actually your new book. So
oh,
that's, do you
yeah.
want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, my new book, yeah, Azure Data Fundamentals. Yeah, I'm literally working on the last bit of that one. And then the final chapter is all about Fabric, right? Like, again, very, very excited when that book comes out. And again, I'm very, very fortunate and lucky, I don't know, that I'm already receiving royalties, huge amount of royalties from that book, even if it's not yet published. So there is an interest on that book, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
amazing.
again, very, very happy, proud. And also, I think Fabric, you and me, it's just kind of like the center of my waking life at the moment, right? Like book training, consulting, obviously, and then this one, right? So that's why we're like an all-arounder Fabric people, and that's why I think the word developer is much more resonating around
Yeah.
that. Like it's not just about being an analyst, an engineer, an architect. It's not just about Power BI as well. It's like you're kind of like in that circle, and like you're developing something. Yeah.
Yeah. You did mention about the term called full stack, like data full stack developer or full stack data developer. One of the earlier
Yeah.
thing that's quite interesting, where that's what Fabric really enables, right? You don't have to wear like different hats. It's like Fabric developer as one hat, kind of just covers everything end to end. And this week there's some very interesting topic about shortcuts.
Yeah,
Previously we
and
kind of
mirrors.
looked.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spoke about events, and then we'll come back to events as well. There's still so much to
Mhm.
explore. But for this week, I think you've got two very interesting demos for
Yeah.
us. So I'll hand it over to you.
All right. By the way, yeah, again, I'm very, very excited about this because, again, just building on that concept of being a Fabric developer, right? And again, not just about being an engineer, analyst, or so on. I think it's very important for you to connect the dots, right? And maybe you have to write some code, maybe you don't have to write some code, and that's fine, right? That's part of being a developer, like working on the tool to achieve the desired outcome. All right, for this particular one, I have two demos to show. One is, well, they're not just shortcuts, they're actually mirrors. And I'll go into that detail, what a mirror is. Um, I have two demos. One is an Azure SQL, and like how are you going to mirror that into Fabric as a warehouse, and all the way to pretty much landing that into a lakehouse, and then maybe write some notebooks around that, right? So that's one. The second is an Azure Cosmos DB, right? Again, no SQL DB, right? That's a no SQL DB, not structured. It's no SQL. And then same thing, you're gonna mirror that to Fabric, and then from there it gets to a warehouse and a lakehouse, and then you also can use notebooks to explore that data or do more data from that data. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an exciting combination, right? This you cover the structure and then a little bit of the no structure side, and yeah.
All right, awesome. So here's my Azure SQL. It's the default AdventureWorks LT. So when you create an Azure database, you can spin this up and choose the sample, and then this creates these tables, right? So you have the sales LT schema in there, like you have customers, right? That you can query, right? And then you can query some address and so on, right? So these are all the AdventureWorks LT data that you can actually play around with. Now, obviously, like the idea is that this is a transactional database, and Azure SQL is a transactional database. It's a database where you want to write information on, right? And in most of the cases, and again, right, like we're transitioning to Fabric, you want to use Fabric to create insights out of this, right? You want to do a heavy read of this, traverse across the thousands of rows, join this with that column, so on and so forth, right? That's something you don't want to do on a transactional database, right? You want to do that in an analytical process or OLAP, and that's where Fabric is a really good tool for that. Now, the first question is, how are you going to bring this data to Fabric? There are many ways to do this, right? There's so many ways in Fabric. The Traditionally, you can use something like Data Factory to do a copy activity. I think we've touched that briefly before, but not Azure SQL. Yeah, but you can use Data Factory, and even in Data Factory alone, there's so many different ways to do it. You can use pipelines, data flows. You can write the code in Notebook, create some ODBC, JDBC connection. Now there's going to be a Airflow support as well. You can use that as well. But one thing that kind of like resonates to me is mirror. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to Fabric. So when in Fabric, you can do a new more options, and you'll see this option called um, there you go, mirror. So you can, in a data warehouse point of view, you can do a mirror of an Azure SQL database. So why is this new? Why is this important? Why is this novel? One is, like the usual use case that you might be doing before Fabric and before this mirror came to be is that you're probably gonna create a read-only replica of an Azure SQL, right? So this AdventureWorks LT, you're probably gonna create a read-only replica of that one. But instead of going to that process, so what Fabric is gonna do now is it's now creating a reverse replica. So it's like, Fabric will be creating the replica for you. So you don't have to create that replica from the Azure SQL,
Mm,
point of view, right? So
yeah.
that's kind of like that's why it's called a reverse replica. So whatever records you have in your Azure SQL, you're replicating that into Fabric, right? And it's
Yeah.
Fabric's responsibility as for as a replication. So it's not Azure SQL's responsibility. It's
Mm,
Fabric's responsibility to do that replication. And
yeah.
second, the most important part of it is that there's no cost associated with this replica,
Mm.
right? So it's like
No
you
cost.
replicated that data for free, right? So that's why
Like no infrastructure cost.
there's not
Like
none. There's none. The
so.
cost later
Yeah.
on
Okay.
would be on consuming that, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
like obviously when you do the ETLs, the shortcuts and whatnot, that's when
Yeah.
the cost
The computing
comes in.
units. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the actual actual mirror
Mm.
itself doesn't have cost, so that's why it's
So
novel.
just let me clarify that. So in mostly what happening currently is you have a transactional database which is
Mhm.
connected to the application, and then there is the analytics database where typically you copy data maybe once or twice per day. You create that replica, right? So you will have two dedicated database infrastructure sitting alongside each other, kind of constantly communicating. And what we're saying is the analytic database is now not required anymore because with mirroring, you can just go, hey, look, we'll just tick this box and don't need to worry about anything. It's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
Fabric
Well,
making the magic in the back end.
yeah. I mean, obviously that's the vision, and that's where it's going, right? But I mean, obviously because as you can see here, it's in preview. There's still a little bit here and there that's not gonna work, and
Yeah,
so on
yeah.
and so forth, right?
But
Okay. So
that's the
basically,
direction
yeah, that's the
heading. Yeah.
direction.
Okay.
So all right. So the process literally create a new mirror, right? And then the idea here is that you're gonna put in the information like server connection, and it's not just basic authentication. Obviously, you can use service principal. That's why you would consider this as a production level of integration, right? So you don't have to type in a service, a credential, right? All
Mm,
right. So
mm.
I've done that already, right? That whole connection part. Okay.
Yep.
Yes. Cancel that. Now, yeah, just go back to my workspace, right? So what I have here, right? So this AdventureWorks LT, that is the source, right?
Hmm.
And then what ends up happening is when you create that mirror, you'll have this. So this is the mirror database, right?
Yeah.
So this what I was talking about. That like this mirror database is free, right? That this
Hmm.
now in within that like there's a concept of when you open the mirror database, it's basically a process, series of process of semantically linking them together or symbolically linking them together, right? So meaning like in that address table, how many rows were replicated, how many product, rows were replicated, when was the last time it's complete,
Mm.
and it also shows you some of the failures and things like this. Like for example, DBO build version can't be replicated because of this reason, right? Invalid character and stuff like that, right?
Okay.
So yeah, and also because it's in preview, not all the columns are supported to be replicated. I think things like geography and all those special type of columns probably
Yeah.
won't be able to be replicated, right? But basically, once that's done, right? Um, and by the way, because it's a job concept, so this
Mm.
mirroring is constantly, pulling or like replicating itself, right? So it's not just a one-time off mirroring or replication. It's like a continuous process of making sure that you have an up-to-date version of the source. Right.
how yeah, that's an interesting thing where like
Yeah. How
how
frequent, how fast, and so on and so forth. That at the moment is a bit black box to me as well, right? But from what I'm
mm,
seeing is that it's fast. It probably uses the concept of CDC as well, change data capture.
mm.
And if for someone watching who's familiar with SQL Server CDC, it's probably using that technology. Right? I'm just telling you. um, all right, we'll not go into the rabbit hole of like the how fast, how big, how frequent, right?
Can
Um,
we test a little bit about if you add a record into one of the tables in right
oh
now
yeah,
and
yeah. For
see if
example, yeah,
yeah
yeah.
by the end of it if it actually pops up.
All right, yeah, sure. Let's say let's do an edit data in here. Now let's
Oh yeah,
create a new row, right? Let's
yeah,
say my address is 777 20 F.
yep,
Of course, modified date is also required. I'm just gonna change that to one.
yeah, that's right.
All right, there you go. So we got that new table in. What happens here, right? So you have that mirror database.
Mm,
Now, out of the box, it creates this SQL endpoint, which is basically a warehouse for you to do T-SQL. Right. So and something we probably have to look at in the future video is that if you do some write operations here, create views here, how will that affect, the mirror and stuff like that, right? So that's probably something we want to explore later on, right? But basically what I want to showcase here is that this SQL endpoint, right? It contains these tables, right? So basically at this point in time, that mirror is already in here as a warehouse. So if I go to the address table, there you go.
oh
So
there you go.
I now have a warehouse here. Oh, by the way, it's here, right?
Yeah, it's
I was
there. That's what I mean. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah.
wow. I didn't even notice, right? Yeah, yeah, there you go, right?
That's
So
pretty
what I
cool.
was saying is that you now have a warehouse in here, right? Like literally like a fabric warehouse based from that Azure SQL. It's like to like, right? I didn't have to define a schema. I didn't have to create a database. I have all the tables that I clicked and choose, right? And it's all in here, right? With no
Mm.
code. Okay, no code, no pipeline, no nothing, right? It's like there out of the box, right?
It
Um,
is a little bit depressing in the sense that this exercise it normally takes a few days.
Yeah, like I can perform a T-SQL. By the way, this is at this point in time, this is T-SQL, right? I can perform that
Yeah.
a T-SQL statement, do a select. Then because this is a warehouse, I can do inter-warehouse, inter-database queries and stuff like that, right? So basically, that's what you'll be doing, right, from a mirror database, or even better, right? So out of the box as well, it already creates a semantic model for you. Right? So again, that's already
Mm.
created for you. Then if you have a semantic model, then hint hint, you can already create a Power BI report
Mm.
very easily, right? Like um yeah, again, I'm telling you this is something. This mirroring is really great. Like it's like for small scale data that doesn't need much transformation, so it's probably the first thing you should be exploring, right? Just mirror the database, creates a warehouse, creates a semantic model, then create your reports, right? Again, low hanging fruit. This would take you probably just days instead of months, or of getting that first few set of things, right? Um,
Mm.
but then even better, right? So because this is Fabric, and again, just want to highlight that in Fabric, all the data is in data Delta Parquet format. So whether it's a warehouse or a lake house, it's all stored in Delta Parquet format. So what I did here is I created a lake house, right? And I've set a shortcut from that mirror database. Right? So you see you can do a new shortcut in here, right? And so select one lake and choose that mirror database. Right? You can use that as kind of like a shortcut for your lake house. And there you go, right?
Mm.
I have a lake house with my Azure SQL data. And as you can see, I have that record, my address, right? It's in here, right? Again, at this point in time, this is a lake house, not a warehouse, right? So what does that mean then? So if this is a lake house, not a warehouse, so that means that um, if I go open a notebook or create a new notebook, right? So I can easily just do notebook stuff here now for my Azure SQL stuff. I don't need to convert them into Delta Parquet. I don't need to convert them to Parquet, Avro, or anything. This is it, right? Like I can do my notebook stuff here. I'm basically using Spark, PySpark,
Mm.
data frames, pandas, and whatnot. So like you can now work on this thing, right? So if I drag it here, right, just run that. I hope this works, and I have enough capacity to do it. Um, yeah. So basically, at this point in time, you just have, you've traversed the whole bronze layer already, right? With just a matter of shortcuts and mirrors. So yeah, thoughts about that.
Just to clarify though, like so with shortcuts, where does the data sit? Let's say in this case the transactional database is in Azure SQL, and when you create that mirror, so that get replicated
Yes,
into that
a
lake
warehouse. Yeah,
in
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 the warehouse,
warehouse.
right? Yeah. So remember, right? Like, so the mirroring activity, it's not a shortcut, right? So there's a difference.
Yeah.
So in mirroring, you're replicating the data,
Mm,
right? So you have your data in Azure SQL. You're trying to replicate that into Fabric via mirroring.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, at that point in time, the data sits in Fabric already.
Yeah.
So that sits in a warehouse database in Fabric.
Okay.
Okay. Now, when you do a shortcut, the data is still in the warehouse, but the
Hmm.
lakehouse is just referencing that data.
So how can it be in the Parquet, like Delta Parquet format
Oh,
if
because the mirror in the warehouse is also of Delta Parquet format.
oh, okay. So the mirroring part is where it does some of the conversion, and then
Yeah,
when you create a shortcut, it's actually a shortcut to the mirror.
correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. So that's why I think so right now, what I can see in preview, the database that can be mirrored is limited, right? So we have
Hmm.
Azure SQL, like I'd assume that Redshift, for example, wouldn't be ready
Not at
anytime
the moment.
soon.
Yeah, I think at the
Mm.
moment there's only three, which is Azure SQL, Azure Cosmos DB, which I'll show later on, and
Mm.
Snowflake.
Okay, Snowflake. All right,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Right.
man. Again, I'm telling you, man, this is powerful, right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah, like my Azure SQL, it's now here, right? It's now in PySpark environment without writing
Mm.
any code, and this is the first time I'm writing the code, right?
Yep.
And again, at this point in time, I'm now pointing to my lakehouse. I'm not pointing to my mirror. I'm not pointing to the Azure SQL. I'm pointing to my lakehouse here. Right?
Yeah, yeah. So this is a combination of mirror and shortcut.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, powerful
Interesting.
component.
Yes.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I mean that's great, man. Now I'm gonna go to the other part, which is Cosmos DB.
Hmm.
Right? And again, this is very interesting, right? Because if you
Yeah.
come to think of it, with Azure SQL, right? Because Azure SQL is structured, they're like relationship schemas and everything, and like that's a proof, I guess, a very mature technology. How you package that, create a replica, how do you do this, how do you do that? There's been a big chunk of, I guess, IP and approach around that already in the past couple of decades, right? Not just years. Azure Cosmos DB though, and the concept of NoSQL and that thing, non-relational, although it's been more than a decade already, but it's still fairly new, right? And then you're trying to marry it up to something like Fabric, to Lakehouse, and so on. That's where it gets a bit fuzzy, right? And it's a bit
Mm.
harder as well, right? Like, so there's a level of learning curve most of the time. Like, let's say a data engineer trying to ingest from a MongoDB or Cosmos DB data. So like usually they, like what happens is that it's the application, the developer's responsibility to format them in, like, give me this column, give me that column. Like there's always that a little bit of friction between the devs and the data engineers, right? When you're working with NoSQL. But yeah, so this one here, I have an account called Michael, and I have a Cosmic Works database here, and then I have a collection called Customer. So if I go here, right, I created a partition by ID, which is this one. So it's the ID, and then inside that are this. So these are like just a generic list of customers, right?
Yep.
So we have Franklin at AdventureWorks, and like so on and so forth, right? Um, so I think I have around, I don't know, like 5,000 records or so. Okay. Now
Mm.
the idea is very much the same from what we've seen in Azure SQL, right? With some little bit of caveats. So same thing here, right? First, you're gonna create a new item, but you're going to mirror a Cosmos DB,
Yep.
right? And same thing, you have to put in the connection details and so on and so forth, right? And by the way, this is the Snowflake that I was mentioning about earlier. So,
Yep.
all right, now that's the source, and then it creates this mirror database. So when I open this mirror database, what I would see here is same thing, right? It's about the
Mm.
replication. So, oh no, not just 5,000, 50,000 rows. So
Mm.
the
Yeah.
idea here is you're trying to, like replicate Cosmos DB, right? The collections, not the table. Right? So there's like 50,000 rows that, and the main difference here is that some may have address, some may not have this, some may not have that. Like, the schema is not constant, right? Like they may not have some of those values, and hence that's the full nature of NoSQL. Okay. Now, in here, gets replicated in here. At this point in time, this is a Delta Parquet format sitting on I believe, a warehouse as well. Right. So the concept of mirroring is a warehouse approach. It's not a lakehouse. It's more like a warehouse concept. Okay. Now, from that, right? So what ended up happening is the same thing, right? You create an analytics endpoint. You can open that, and from here, right? This is a warehouse, and you can already query a subset of that records in here. There you go. Right. So now, literally, those flat files, those unstructured data is now a table without doing anything, right? I mean, without transforming it into a table, right? So that's all handled for you by Fabric.
Yeah.
So like in some records that doesn't have order date, we'll just put that as null, right? And so on and so forth, right? So it just kind of like positions that okay, I'm gonna make you a table, and if you don't have that record, I'm gonna make it null. If others have that column and you don't have it, like it auto manage that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So because
Right.
this is a warehouse, you can use T-SQL again to perform that query. Again, that at that point in time, you can do cross database query, this and that. Right. Now, what's also interesting, again, you probably might have hinted this, is that you can create a shortcut of that mirror database into a lakehouse. Right? So you can mirror this database into a lakehouse. And in here, I found out something that's a bit interesting. Obviously, you can just open the notebook. I think I created that already in here. Yeah, there you go. So you can just point to a path, right? Like because this is a files path within that lakehouse, right? You can get that path in here and then read that as and use Spark natively on a notebook to read that as a Delta Parquet format, right? And then from here, what you can do is actually save that as a table. So in this case, let's say I'm gonna customer record, right? I'm just gonna again, read this again. Probably just 100 in here instead of 1,000, or even just 10. Yeah, there you go. Right. So now if I refresh this, now we get to have the customer record in here.
Yeah.
Okay. Now from there, I'm gonna query that the customer record. And there you go. These are my 10 records from this lakehouse table. Okay. So that's why, again, there's just a bit of transformation that you have to do, at least for now, with this Cosmos DB mirroring. But I think in the future that should just be seamless as well. So
Yeah.
you would be looking at in the future wherein like a Cosmos DB data can be easily become a table in a lakehouse. Then from there you can do more complex transformation, do more maybe data science, or do some AI stuff on that, and so on and so forth. So it unlocks that possibility for you. Right? So yeah, man, this is it, man.
Yeah.
What's your take?
Like looking at the end-to-end journey again. So currently, this transactional database and this analytics database, which kind of only run the task, once or twice a day, probably the most common ones that I've seen. And then from there, the analytic database, we can connect, SQL database, Power BI, whatever, to that, so we can run the reports. Like with this one, with mirroring, it feels like, okay, it feels like live to a certain
Mhm.
degree as well, right? Because
Yeah,
once you have that mirror, we've just tested that record get updated pretty quickly, and then semantic model is ready. If I connect Power BI to it, or even via direct lake method, the
yeah.
data actually is pretty live compared, like, yeah, to the transactional database.
Yeah, and then obviously from a lake house, you can also shortcut this into an event house. The one we talked about yesterday, right? So last time. So again, all this marrying up of data, this just becomes a bit more seamless, right? Um, Yeah, like
Yeah,
yeah, and like
it's
create a
yeah.
real-time dashboard straight away. Use Power Query, use Reflex, right? So a lot of those things, right? Like those are unlocked for you, right? With this whole concept, really fast. And that's gonna be very fast for you to unlock those capabilities.
Mm. Yeah, we can probably run a end-to-end demo, like play around with a bit more to see how live, like what's the best place to fit a business logic into this process. Like so using mirroring, we've got data sitting in a transactional table. We need to do some like transformation.
Mhm. Yeah, so
Like
I think we still need to use that medallion architecture for that one. Like mirroring is still bronze layer, right? And then you still have a silver layer of those transformations, data cleansing, removing duplicates, and so on and so forth, right? SCD2, SCD4, right? And then there's still a data modeling concept on gold, right? Which is semantic model or a warehouse, however you want to use that, right? So I think those stages are still relevant for a really full-blown scalable pipeline, right? Again, that's my opinion. Um, but again, right, those are optional, right? Like again, you can just do mirror Power BI or like mirror a little bit of transformation Power BI or like that's the whole essence and beauty of Fabric, right? Like it doesn't restrict you to just do it this way. It allows you to do it in many different ways.
yeah, definitely. And I'm just sticking to that. If I don't care about like silver and golden layer right now. I just want live data from source, but I need to apply some business logic to it. So just to really cut it to the bare bone, I'm still wondering because if I use pipeline, so then the pipeline needs to be scheduled.
Mhm.
Like, is there a way? What's the best way to have that business logic built in? Because
Yeah,
I
so
can't use DAX as well, right? Can I use DAX?
you can, yeah. But again, you can because like you don't have to worry that you're trying to do that in analysis services because again, you're using the same Fabric capacity for that one, right? So
Mm,
yeah, so
I
again,
think yeah, I think it's probably something that's a lot of information. So
yeah.
just we'll
And,
need
and,
a
and,
bit of
in,
time
and
for
in
me
my
to
head,
absorb.
I also have another approach, which I might actually want to use an event house instead. And then in that event house, instead of going with the mirroring approach, I can go with the CDC approach in event house. Maybe in the future video, that's something I'll show you, like the CDC on event house and like a real time dashboard ish type of thing.
Yeah, I think that would be a quite a interesting. So the drive, regardless of which approach we take, the drive is to get to as close to real-time reporting as possible, and then we can probably try to explore like different options to apply business logics and the pros and cons of that,
Yeah,
whether it's event house or yeah, no, but this is yeah, it opens up a lot of new way of thinking and it simplifies a lot of things. It's still in preview at the moment,
yeah,
but it
it's still
does,
pretty good. Yeah,
and it is only available for three like data sources. But I think including Snowflake is a pretty big step.
yeah,
I don't know, like I would assume Azure SQL will be the first one going into GA,
yeah, yeah.
general availability, and then Cosmo maybe very close with that, but Snowflake because it's another organization might take a bit longer. But yeah, no, super interesting.
Yeah, right. That's why again, it's very easy to demo because it's literally clicks, 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 right? I don't have to write a lot of code and so on, right? Yeah, that's why I like it, man. And that's why I think Microsoft and Fabric they're onto something here, right? Like they're really true to their motto of like unified data. Right?
Thank you very much, MJ. Thanks for the demo. Super exciting. Mirroring is just another thing that seems to be able to actually unlock so much. So yeah, no, thank you so much for that.
No worries. Well, thanks, David, as well, and yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you soon.